What happens when two of the biggest names in global music suddenly come together, and their collaboration feels like more than just another feature on an album? Bruno Mars and Karol G have created exactly that kind of conversation, and now fans around the world are asking one question. Is this simply a major musical collaboration, or is there something genuinely special about the connection between these two artists? Before we go any further, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell us in the comments what you think. It's because when you look closely at the story, there are several details that make this partnership especially interesting. Karol G has spent years transforming herself from a Latin music superstar into one of the most recognizable artists in the world. Her influence stretches far beyond the Spanish-speaking music market. She has become a global pop culture figure, dominating streaming platforms, concert stages, social media, and international music charts. And then there is Bruno Mars. Few artists can move between pop, R&B, funk, soul, hip-hop, and classic showmanship as naturally as Bruno Mars. His career has been built around unforgettable melodies, live performances, massive global hits, and collaborations that often become cultural moments. So when Bruno Mars appeared as part of Karol G's new musical era, fans immediately paid attention. And the reason is simple. This is not the most obvious musical pairing. At first glance, Karol G represents the modern Latin pop and reggaeton world, while Bruno Mars has built his identity around a completely different musical vocabulary. But that difference may actually be what makes the collaboration so powerful. Instead of competing with each other's styles, the two artists can bring completely different strengths into the same record. Karol G brings her distinctive voice, Latin identity, emotional delivery, and enormous connection with Spanish-speaking audiences. Bruno Mars brings his unmistakable vocal control, melodic instincts, rhythmic precision, and ability to transform a song into something that feels instantly familiar. And when those ingredients meet, something interesting happens. The collaboration doesn't need either artist to completely change who they are. Instead, it creates a musical bridge between two enormous audiences. That is why the Bruno Mars and Karol G collaboration has generated so much attention. But there is another question hiding underneath the music. Why Bruno Mars? And why Karol G? Because in the modern music industry, major collaborations are rarely random. Artists, producers, labels, managers, and creative teams spend enormous amounts of time deciding which voices belong together. A collaboration can introduce an artist to a completely new audience, expand streaming numbers, create viral moments, and generate international media attention. For Karol G, working with Bruno Mars places an entirely different spotlight on her music. For Bruno Mars, collaborating with one of the biggest Latin artists on the planet opens another door into a massive global audience. And that is where the story becomes even more interesting. Bruno Mars has already demonstrated that he does not need to follow conventional boundaries. His career has repeatedly crossed genres and generations. From his solo records to Silk Sonic with Anderson .Paak, Bruno has shown that his greatest strength may be his ability to make different musical worlds feel connected. Karol G has done something similar in her own way. She has helped bring Latin music further into the center of global pop culture without abandoning the identity that made her successful in the first place. So perhaps this collaboration is not really about Bruno Mars entering Karol G's world or Karol G entering Bruno Mars' world. Maybe it is about creating a third space where both identities can exist at the same time. And that possibility is exactly what makes fans curious. Because when you listen to the idea behind Bruno Mars and Karol G working together, it becomes easy to understand why the pairing feels so exciting. This is not simply about two famous names appearing next to each other. It is about two artists with completely different cultural backgrounds discovering common ground through music. And here's where things get particularly fascinating. Bruno Mars is known for his attention to detail. His performances are carefully constructed. His arrangements are carefully produced. His vocals are deliberate. Even the smallest elements of a Bruno Mars performance can feel intentional. Karol G also understands the power of presentation. Her music, visuals, fashion, performances, and relationship with her fans are all part of a much larger artistic identity. So when these two worlds collide, fans naturally start looking beyond the song itself. They begin asking whether this could be the beginning of a larger creative relationship. Could there be another collaboration? Could they perform together on stage? Could Bruno Mars appear during one of Karol G's major performances? Could Karol G eventually return the favor with another project? None of those possibilities should be treated as confirmed unless the artists themselves announce them. But the speculation exists because the musical chemistry is intriguing enough to make people imagine what could happen next. And this is where we need to separate facts from fan theories. There is currently no reason to claim that Bruno Mars and Karol G are romantically involved, secretly working on a massive project, or planning something that has not been officially announced. The phrase "something special" does not have to mean romance. It can simply mean artistic chemistry. And that distinction matters, because the most interesting part of the story may not be whether there is a secret relationship behind the scenes. It may be the fact that two completely different musical identities can sound surprisingly natural together. Think about the larger trend happening in the music industry. The boundaries between genres have become increasingly flexible. Latin pop, American pop, R&B, hip-hop, Afrobeats, K-pop, and electronic music constantly influence one another. Today's biggest global artists are no longer limited to one language, one market, or one musical category. And Karol G is one of the clearest examples of that transformation. Her international success demonstrates that Spanish-language music can become a dominant force in global pop culture. Bruno Mars, meanwhile, represents another kind of global crossover. His music has consistently reached audiences across continents because the fundamental ingredients are universal: rhythm, melody, emotion, charisma, and performance. Put those two forces together, and suddenly the collaboration becomes more than a headline. It becomes a snapshot of where global pop music is heading. And there is one particular detail that makes this even more interesting. Karol G's audience is enormous. Bruno Mars' audience is enormous. But their audiences are not completely identical. That means that collaboration can function as an introduction. A Karol G fan who has primarily followed Latin music may discover more of Bruno Mars' catalog. A Bruno Mars fan who has followed pop, R&B, and funk may suddenly become more interested in Karol G's music. That is the power of a true crossover. And when the song is good, the result can become much bigger than the original marketing strategy. Can spread through TikTok, can appear on Instagram Reels, can generate reaction videos, can dominate YouTube searches, can inspire fan edits, can create concert requests, and eventually it can become part of the artist's live performance identities. This is why fans are watching closely, because the biggest collaborations do not always end when the song ends. Sometimes the song becomes the beginning of a new chapter. Now let's slow everything down for a moment, because there is an important detail that can easily get lost when a collaboration becomes a viral topic. Bruno Mars and Karol G do not need to prove that they are friends, business partners, or anything beyond collaborators for this partnership to be meaningful. The music itself can be enough. In fact, that may be the most exciting interpretation. Two artists at completely different points in their musical journeys can meet on one track and create something neither could have created alone. That is what collaboration is supposed to do. It should add something. It should create contrast. It should make listeners hear both artists differently. And Bruno Mars has a particularly interesting history when it comes to collaboration. His work with Anderson .Paak as Silk Sonic showed how powerful chemistry between artists can become when both performers understand timing, groove, vocal interplay, and stage presence. His other collaborations have demonstrated that he is comfortable stepping into different musical environments without losing his identity. Karol G has also collaborated across genres and cultures, proving that her artistry is not confined to one formula. So this partnership fits into a much larger pattern. Both artists are willing to experiment. Both understand mainstream appeal. Both know how to create moments that work on streaming platforms and on massive stages. And both have something extremely valuable in the modern music industry: recognizable identity. You hear a Bruno Mars song, and you often know who it is within seconds. You hear Karol G, and her vocal identity can be just as recognizable. That is rare. And when two recognizable voices meet, the contrast can become the hook. This is why fans may be asking for more. They are not necessarily asking because they believe there is a secret story. They are asking because the combination works. Now imagine the possibilities. A live performance with Bruno Mars and Karol G sharing the same stage. The lights go down. The audience starts screaming. Karol G begins the song. Then the beat changes. The crowd realizes what is happening. Bruno Mars walks onto the stage. Within seconds, the performance becomes a viral moment. That scenario is hypothetical, but it demonstrates why the collaboration has so much potential. Because both artists are performers. They are not simply studio musicians. They understand spectacle. They understand timing. They understand how to turn a song into a moment that people remember. And if they ever perform the collaboration together live, the expectation would be enormous. But again, until something is officially announced, it remains speculation. And that is exactly why fans should enjoy the possibilities without turning theories into facts. Now, here's the part that may be the biggest takeaway from the entire story. The real significance of Bruno Mars and Karol G may not be about whether there is a hidden relationship behind the collaboration. It may be about what their partnership represents. Global music is becoming increasingly connected. The biggest stars are no longer separated by language. They are no longer separated by geography. They are no longer separated by traditional genre categories. And Bruno Mars and Karol G represent two different sides of that transformation. One is an American superstar whose music draws from decades of pop, funk, soul, R&B, and classic performance traditions. The other is a Colombian superstar who has helped bring Latin music to an unprecedented global audience. Together, they demonstrate how modern pop music can cross borders without erasing cultural identity. And that may be the reason this collaboration feels special. Not because we need to invent a secret story. Not because there has to be a hidden romance. Not because every interaction between two celebrities must mean something beyond the music. But because sometimes two artists simply have the right combination of talent, timing, audience, and creative energy. And when that happens, people notice. The collaboration becomes a conversation. The conversation becomes a trend. The trend becomes a cultural moment. And suddenly, one song can connect millions of people who might otherwise never have listened to each other's music. That is the power of Bruno Mars and Karol G. And the biggest question now is not necessarily, are they secretly something more? The better question is, what could they create next? Because if this first collaboration proves anything, it is that the musical possibilities between these two artists are far from limited. Imagine Bruno Mars exploring even more Latin-inspired rhythms. Imagine Karol G experimenting with funk, soul, or retro pop production. Imagine a full live performance built around their contrasting styles. Imagine another collaboration where they have even more creative freedom. None of that is confirmed, but all of it is possible. And that is what makes fans curious. There is still so much room for this story to develop. For now, what we know is enough. Bruno Mars and Karol G have brought two powerful musical identities together, and the result has generated international attention because it feels fresh, unexpected, and culturally significant. Whether this becomes a one-time collaboration or the beginning of a longer creative partnership remains to be seen. But one thing is already clear. When Bruno Mars and Karol G share the same musical space, people pay attention. And perhaps that is the real something special. Not a secret relationship, not an unconfirmed story, but chemistry between two artists who understand how to make millions of people listen. So now the question goes to you. Do you think Bruno Mars and Karol G should collaborate again? Would you want to see them perform together live? And most importantly, do you think their musical chemistry is strong enough for another major hit? Let us know your opinion in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next update. Because if Bruno Mars and Karol G decide to take this collaboration one step further, the next chapter could be even bigger. And when that moment arrives, you can be sure the entire music world will be watching. But the story does not end with the collaboration itself. In fact, this may be where the most interesting part begins. Because whenever two global superstars from different musical worlds come together, the immediate reaction is often focused on the song. Fans listen to the vocals, analyze the production, study the lyrics, watch the music video, and search for every behind-the-scenes detail. But after that first wave of excitement disappears, another question remains. What does this collaboration actually mean for both artists? For Karol G, Bruno Mars represents a completely different dimension of global pop. She has already proven that she can dominate Latin music and reach listeners far beyond Latin America. Her career has become one of the clearest examples of how Spanish-language music can become a central part of the international mainstream. But collaborating with an artist like Bruno Mars creates another kind of connection. It introduces her music to audiences who may not normally follow Latin pop. And that matters. Music fans in the United States, Europe, Asia, and other parts of the world may recognize Bruno Mars immediately, even if they are less familiar with Karol G's complete discography. A collaboration can change that. Suddenly, listeners who came for Bruno Mars may stay for Karol G. And listeners who came for Karol G may discover another side of Bruno Mars. That is how musical crossover works at its best. It does not replace one audience with another. It expands both. And from a business perspective, the potential is enormous. Streaming platforms reward songs that can travel across markets. Social media rewards memorable moments. Radio rewards songs that can connect with broad audiences. Concert promoters benefit when an artist's international profile continues to grow. A successful Bruno Mars and Karol G collaboration can potentially operate across all of those spaces simultaneously. But there is something even more important than numbers. There is credibility. When established artists collaborate with each other, they are not simply exchanging fan bases. They are also recognizing each other's artistic influence. That is why collaborations between major artists can feel significant even before the first performance happens. It sends a message. Karol G is saying, in effect, that her music belongs in the same global conversation as some of the biggest pop and R&B artists in the world. And Bruno Mars, by entering that musical space, demonstrates once again that his artistry can exist comfortably beyond the boundaries of one genre. That is a powerful statement. But there is another layer to the story. Language. Bruno Mars primarily performs in English. Karol G is one of the biggest Spanish-language artists in the world. For decades, language was often treated as a barrier in the global music business. Today, it is increasingly becoming a bridge. Listeners do not always need to understand every word to connect with a song. They respond to rhythm. They respond to melody. They respond to emotion. They respond to charisma. And both Bruno Mars and Karol G understand that instinctively. This is one of the reasons their collaboration can feel so natural. They come from different musical traditions, but both understand how to communicate through performance. That is something universal. And perhaps that is why the fan reaction has become so interesting. Some fans are excited about the song itself. Others are already imagining what a full live performance could look like. Some are analyzing every interaction between the artists, and others are asking whether this could lead to another collaboration. But there is an important distinction. A strong musical connection does not automatically mean there is a secret personal relationship. In today's celebrity culture, a photograph, a backstage moment, or a shared performance can instantly create speculation. Social media moves faster than official information. A few seconds of footage can become a headline. A fan theory can become a viral post. And before long, people may start treating speculation as fact. That is why the safest and most accurate way to look at Bruno Mars and Karol G is through the music first. Because the music is already enough to generate excitement. There is no need to invent a story that has not been confirmed. What we can discuss is the chemistry. What we can analyze is the artistic potential. And what we can observe is how naturally their collaboration fits into the current direction of global music. Now imagine the possibilities if this partnership continues. A second single could explore an entirely different sound. Maybe something more rhythmic. Maybe something more soulful. Maybe a track built around Bruno's signature funk influences and Karol G's Latin pop energy. That combination could produce something completely unexpected. And unexpected is often exactly what audiences want from major artists. Fans do not always want another version of what they have already heard. They want a surprise. They want a moment that makes them stop scrolling. They want a song that sounds different enough to become instantly recognizable. And both Bruno Mars and Karol G have the ability to create that kind of moment. Bruno's catalog is filled with songs that became cultural references. Karol G has built an equally powerful collection of global hits that have shaped modern Latin pop. Put those creative instincts together, and the possibilities become enormous. But there is another reason a future collaboration could be even bigger. Timing. Both artists are operating at a point where their global visibility is extremely high. Bruno Mars continues to command enormous attention through his music, performances, and the romantic tour era. Karol G continues to expand her global influence and maintain a massive international fanbase. When two artists reach that level simultaneously, a collaboration can become much more than a standard feature. It can become an event. And that word is important. Event. Because today's biggest music releases are no longer consumed only as songs. They become moments across multiple platforms. The teaser appears online. Fans react. The release arrives. Streaming numbers begin climbing. Clips spread across TikTok and Instagram. YouTube reaction videos appear. Entertainment websites publish stories. Fans create edits. And eventually, the song becomes part of live shows. One moment creates another. That cycle can continue for weeks or even months. And if Bruno Mars and Karol G eventually bring the collaboration to a major stage, the reaction could be enormous. Picture a stadium packed with tens of thousands of fans. Karol G is performing. The audience knows the song is coming. Then the lights change. The production slows down. The crowd begins to realize what is happening. And Bruno Mars appears. That kind of entrance does not need an elaborate explanation. The audience reaction becomes the story. Phones go into the air. Fans scream. Clips appear online within minutes. And suddenly, one performance becomes a global headline. Again, that is only a possibility. There has been no need to treat it as a confirmed event. But the potential is obvious. And that potential is precisely why fans continue talking about this collaboration. There is also a larger cultural story here. For years, the global music industry often separated artists into categories. American pop, Latin music, K-pop, R&B, hip-hop, Afrobeats, electronic music. But those walls are becoming weaker. Modern listeners are increasingly comfortable moving between genres and languages. A listener can have a Bruno Mars song, a Karol G song, a K-pop song, and an Afrobeats track sitting next to each other in the same playlist. That is the new normal. And collaborations like Bruno Mars and Karol G reflect that reality. They show that global music is becoming less about where an artist comes from and more about what happens when their creativity connects. This is why the collaboration deserves attention beyond celebrity gossip. It represents a larger shift in the industry. The world's biggest music stars are becoming increasingly interconnected, and fans are becoming global listeners. They are not asking permission to cross genres. They simply follow whatever sounds good. That is a major change. And Bruno Mars has always understood the power of timeless music. His songs frequently draw from older musical traditions while still sounding modern. Karol G has also demonstrated an ability to take elements of Latin music and present them in a way that connects with a worldwide audience. Their collaboration therefore brings together two different approaches to global music. One rooted heavily in American pop, soul, funk, and R&B traditions, the other deeply connected to Latin culture and the evolution of reggaeton and Latin pop. And when those influences meet, the result can be bigger than either category. That may ultimately be the biggest story. Not whether Bruno Mars and Karol G are secretly something more, but whether they have discovered a creative combination that deserves to continue. Because sometimes the strongest collaborations are not planned to create a long-term partnership. Sometimes artists simply meet at the right moment. The song works. The audiences respond. The chemistry is undeniable. And then everyone asks for another one. That is where the story could go. A second collaboration. A live performance. A remix. Another appearance. Perhaps even a future project. Nothing should be presented as confirmed until it comes directly from the artists or their official teams. But the door is clearly open creatively. And if Bruno Mars and Karol G decide to walk through that door again, expectations will be much higher. The first collaboration creates curiosity. The second creates a pattern. And a pattern can become a partnership. That is why fans are watching. The real question is not whether the two artists can work together. They already have. The question is whether they will decide that the chemistry is too good to leave at just one song. And that is the unanswered question hanging over this entire story. For now, Bruno Mars and Karol G remain two global superstars connected through music. But music has a strange way of creating unexpected relationships between artists, audiences, cultures, and generations. A single song can introduce millions of people to a different sound. A single performance can create a memory that lasts for years. And a single collaboration can sometimes become the beginning of an entirely new chapter. So while fans continue debating whether there is something special between Bruno Mars and Karol G, perhaps the answer is actually sitting right in front of us. Yes, there is something special. It is the music. It is the contrast. It is the chemistry. It is the ability of two artists from different musical worlds to meet somewhere in the middle and create something that gets people talking. And if that chemistry continues, the next chapter could be even more interesting than the first. Because Bruno Mars and Karol G have already shown the world what happens when two global musical forces collide. Now everyone is waiting to see what happens if they decide to do it again.